You know, people say the truth sets you free, but the truth? The truth almost killed me. I was 60 years old when it happened, old enough to know better, but still foolish enough to believe in promises whispered in the dark. He told me he'd never lie to me, never break my heart, never turn into the kind of man my mama used to warn me about. And I believed him. Lord, I believed him with every tired bone in my body. I remember the night it happened. The house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your chest, makes you listen harder than you want to. He had fallen asleep on the couch, phone still glowing in his hand. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't hunting for demons. I was just a woman who hadn't heard "I love you" in weeks, trying to understand why everything felt cold. When I picked up that phone, my hands were shaking, not because I expected to find something, but because a part of me, a small, wounded part, already knew the truth was waiting for me on that screen. And I swear, the first message I opened felt like someone had taken a knife and pressed it slow and deep under my ribs. Her name, her words, the little hearts and the late-night plans, all of it wrapped around his promises like barbed wire. I read until my eyes burned, until the room spun, until the woman I thought I was, confident, loyal, patient, felt like a stranger in my own skin. And in that moment, standing in the dim light of our living room, I realized something painful, something heavy, something I still carry. Betrayal don't come from enemies. It comes from the people you hand your heart to, the ones you pray for, the ones you wake up for, the ones you trust with the softest parts of your soul. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just sat down on the edge of that couch, watching him sleep like a man with nothing on his conscience. And the silence, that silence said everything he never had the courage to say out loud. That was the night my life cracked open, the night I stopped being the woman who waited and started becoming the woman who finally, after decades, began to tell her story. I didn't wake him that night. I couldn't. Something inside me just folded in on itself, quiet and trembling, like a bird that suddenly forgot how to fly. I sat there, watching his chest rise and fall, wondering how a man could sleep so peacefully while the truth was screaming inside my bones. And you know what hurt the most? It wasn't the messages. It wasn't the betrayal. It was the silence I had been ignoring for months. He used to talk to me, not just with words, but with the soft things, the hand on my back in the kitchen, the late-night conversations about dreams we were too old to chase, the way he'd say my name like it meant home. But little by little, the man I loved started disappearing, like fog lifting from a field at sunrise. And I kept telling myself it was stress, or work, or the world turning too fast. I never once let myself consider that he might be turning towards someone else, turning toward laughter that wasn't mine, toward warmth I could no longer reach. So that night, while he slept only inches away from me, I realized something awful, something no woman wants to admit. I had been lonely for a very long time, lonelier than a married woman has any business being. I held the phone in my hands, reading his words over and over, like they were stab wounds I couldn't stop touching. Every message felt like a reminder of all the ways I had shrunk myself just to keep the peace, just to hold on to love that had stopped holding on to me. And let me tell you something, when a woman gives up her voice just to keep someone from walking away, she loses more than her pride. She loses the sound of her own soul. I didn't cry, not yet. My tears were sitting somewhere deep, gathering strength like a storm waiting for permission. Instead, I placed his phone gently on the table, stood up, and walked to the mirror in the hallway we painted together, the hallway where we argued, where we made up, where I once pressed my forehead against his and promised we'd grow old side by side. And there I was, 60 years old, staring at a woman who looked tired of pretending, tired of hoping, tired of carrying a love that had already slipped through her fingers. I whispered to my reflection, so soft even the walls couldn't hear me, "Baby, it's time to stop breaking yourself for people who don't notice the pieces." I didn't sleep at all that night, not even for a minute. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee, listening to the refrigerator hum like it was trying to comfort me. When the sun finally started creeping through the blinds, painting the walls in that tired, yellow morning light, I felt older than I had ever felt in my life. Funny, isn't it? How pain can age you faster than time ever could. I heard him walking toward me, slow, careless steps on the hardwood floor, the same steps that used to make my heart lift. But that morning, they sounded like footsteps belonging to a stranger. He walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes, didn't even look at me at first, just opened the fridge and reached for the orange juice like it was any other day. And the silence was screaming between us. Then he turned, saw my face, saw I hadn't slept, saw something was different. "You okay?" he asked, just like that, like he hadn't broken the ground beneath my feet, like he hadn't written his affection to somebody else at 2:17 a.m. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at him, studying the lines on his face, the ones I used to trace with my fingertips. And I thought to myself, how many lies did those lines witness? Finally, I said his name, quiet, steady, too calm for the storm inside me. He froze, like he already knew what was coming. I placed his phone gently on the table between us, didn't push it toward him, didn't open the messages. I didn't need to. His whole face changed, his eyes, his breathing, his posture. Guilt has a way of showing itself before the mouth ever gets a chance to speak. "How long?" I asked. My voice didn't crack. My hands didn't shake. It was the calmest I had sounded in months. And he couldn't even look at me. He stared at the floor like the truth was hiding in the wood grain. "It's not what you think," he whispered. Isn't it wild how those 6 words are the anthem of every guilty man on this earth? I let him talk, let him spin every excuse, every half-truth, every desperate attempt to patch the holes in a sinking ship. But I had already sunk. The night before had dragged me straight to the bottom. When he finally stopped talking, I took a long breath, one that tasted like endings and beginnings twisted together. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm just done being invisible." And that was the first truth I had spoken out loud in years. You would think that after hearing the truth, or whatever version of the truth he tried to offer, I'd explode, cry, throw something, demand explanations that would never heal me. But the strangest thing happened. I felt nothing. Not emptiness, not rage, just a quiet, steady hollowness, like the moment right after an earthquake, when the ground stops shaking, but your body still remembers the fear. He kept talking, tripping over his own words, trying to paint the mess pretty. It was just a mistake. It didn't mean anything. You and we're stronger than this. If we were so strong, why was I breaking? I stood up from the kitchen table, and for the first time in a long time, my legs felt sturdy, like they remembered they belonged to a woman who once carried her whole life on her back and still managed to keep walking. I walked past him, didn't touch him, didn't meet his eyes, just opened the window and let the cold morning air wash over my face. And that's when it hit me, the real breaking point. Not the betrayal, not the lies, not even the loneliness. It was the realization that I had forgotten who I was long before another woman entered the picture. Somewhere between the years, I had slowly peeled pieces of myself away, my joy, my dreams, my confidence, handing them to him like offerings just to keep our home from crumbling. I whispered, almost to myself, I used to be someone, and my voice cracked, not from pain, but from recognition. He tried to come closer, tried to touch my shoulder. I stepped back. My body moved before my mind even decided. Don't, I said. Soft, firm, final. He looked lost, confused, like he couldn't understand how his choices had finally cost him the one thing he never thought he'd lose, my presence. What do you want me to do? He asked. And for the first time, I answered without fear. I want you to stop talking like I can't hear my own hurt. The words surprised both of us, but they tasted right, like truth finally stretching its legs after being cramped for too many years. I sat down on the couch, wrapped my arms around myself, and breathed, really breathed, like a woman pulling air into lungs that had been half empty for decades. And in that quiet room, I realized something powerful. This wasn't the end of my world. This was the end of forgetting myself. After the arguing stopped, after the excuses faded into the walls, after the storm of the night before finally settled, the house felt different. Not empty, not heavy, just unfamiliar, like I had walked into a life that didn't quite fit me anymore. He stayed on the other side of the room, pacing like a man who couldn't decide whether to apologize again or disappear. And me, I sat there with my hands in my lap, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, the faucet dripping, a bird outside tapping at the window. Every small sound felt louder than his voice ever had these past few months. Silence, real silence, doesn't always mean loneliness. Sometimes it's the sound of yourself returning. He finally stopped pacing. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. And the old me, the woman who bent until she nearly snapped, she would have rushed to comfort him. She would have swallowed the pain, smoothed it over, said, "We'll work on it," even when her heart was bleeding. But that woman wasn't sitting on that couch anymore. I looked at him, really looked, at the guilt on his face, the fear in his eyes, the trembling in his jaw. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. You didn't lose me today, I said. You've been losing me for a long time. You just didn't notice. His mouth opened, but no words came out. And in that silence, something inside me softened, but not for him, for me. I realized I didn't hate him. I didn't even want revenge. What I wanted was to feel whole again. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the world was moving like always. Cars driving by, neighbors leaving for work, sunlight settling on the pavement. Life wasn't waiting for me to heal. It was happening, with or without my permission. I placed my hand on the windowsill and whispered to myself, "You're allowed to choose you." And for the first time in years, I believed it. After he left for work that morning, the house finally exhaled. Or maybe it was me. I'm still not sure. I walked through each room slowly, like I was revisiting a museum of a life that didn't belong to me anymore. The pictures on the wall, I stopped in front of them. Our wedding photo, vacations, birthdays, moments captured with smiles that looked real at the time, but now felt like echoes. I touched the frame, and for the first time, I didn't feel that familiar sting of, what did I do wrong? Because deep down, I finally understood. I didn't lose him. He lost the version of me that kept giving even when she had nothing left. I went to the bathroom mirror, the same mirror where I'd rushed makeup, fixed my hair, tried to look less tired, tried to compete with women I had never even met. I leaned in close, studying every line, every wrinkle, every mark time had carved into my skin. I used to hate those lines, used to think they made me look old, undesirable, worn out. But that morning, those lines felt like medals, proof that I had survived things younger women would crumble under. I whispered to the woman in the mirror, "You're still here." And then louder, steadier, "You're still enough." It wasn't confidence, not yet. It was more like a small flame, flickering, fragile, but refusing to die. I walked into the closet next. Clothes I hadn't worn in years stared back at me. Dresses I bought for dinners we never went to, shoes I bought to look prettier for him, colors he said he liked. I realized something sharp and painful. I had been shrinking myself into the shape of his preferences for so long that I had forgotten what I even liked. So I pulled out a dress, not one he chose, not one he favored, but the one I bought years ago because it made me feel alive, bright, beautiful. I held it against my chest, and for the first time that day, I felt something warm bloom inside me. Hope. And in that quiet moment, standing alone in my closet, I realized the truth. The woman I used to be wasn't gone. She had just been buried under years of trying to be good enough. And now, finally, she was coming back. Later that afternoon, after the house had settled and my heartbeat finally slowed to something human again, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea. The sun was warm on my face, the breeze soft, and for the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for my phone to buzz, or for footsteps behind me, or for someone else's needs to swallow my own. I just sat there, breathing, existing, being. And while I sat there, I started thinking about love. Not the storybook kind, not the movie kind, the real kind, the kind that grows old with you. And it hit me, clear as day. Love is not supposed to make you feel small. Love is not supposed to make you question your worth. Love is not supposed to feel like begging for crumbs from the table you helped build. I had spent years believing that if I loved hard enough, stayed patient enough, forgave fast enough, he would choose me the way I chose him. But love, real love, doesn't require you to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. I watched the neighborhood kids ride their bikes, laughing like joy was the easiest thing in the world, and for a moment, I wondered when I stopped being that woman, the one who laughed freely, who trusted easily, who believed love was simple. Maybe it wasn't him who changed first. Maybe it was me, bending, shrinking, twisting to keep a dying love alive. I closed my eyes and placed a hand over my heart, not dramatically, but gently, like I was checking to see if it was still beating for something other than pain. And it was, faint but steady. I whispered into the warm air, I deserve a love that doesn't run, a love that doesn't hide, a love that doesn't make me forget myself. Saying those words out loud felt like opening a window inside my soul, letting years of stale air escape. As I sat there, listening to the wind dance through the trees, I realized something powerful. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is learning what love isn't. And once you understand that, once you really understand it, you can never go back to accepting anything less. That evening, when he came home, the house felt different. Not colder, not warmer, just honest, like the walls finally stopped pretending. He walked in quietly, carrying the weight of the morning on his shoulders. He looked at me like he was searching for the ending of a story he didn't know how to write anymore. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded, not because I owed him anything, but because I owed myself the truth, all the truths I had swallowed over the years just to keep the peace. We sat at opposite ends of the couch, not touching, not leaning, not reaching. Just two people who had forgotten how to speak to each other without fear. He opened his mouth to start apologizing again, but I lifted my hand gently. "Let me talk first," I said. And for the first time in our marriage, he listened without interrupting. I told him about the loneliness, the nights I lay awake wondering if I mattered anymore, the birthdays he forgot, the anniversaries he brushed off, the conversations he shut down the moment they became inconvenient. I told him about shrinking myself to fit the version of me he preferred, quieter, softer, smaller. And I told him about the woman I used to be, the one who laughed loud, who danced in the kitchen, who believed she deserved love without condition. With every word, I felt pieces of myself returning, like I was stitching my soul back together, thread by trembling thread. When I finally stopped speaking, he was crying, not the loud, dramatic kind, but quiet tears sliding down the face of a man who realized too late that silence can break a heart just as deeply as betrayal. He whispered, "Why didn't you tell me all this before?" And the answer came so easily, I almost laughed. "Because every time I tried, you made me feel like my feelings were too heavy for you to carry." The room went quiet, but it wasn't the painful silence of the past. It was the silence that follows a truth too big to ignore. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if forgiveness was possible or if healing meant walking away. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of either answer. Because speaking my truth felt like breathing fresh air after years of holding my breath. After our conversation ended, the house fell into a strange kind of stillness. Not heavy, not tense, just waiting. He sat there on the couch, shoulders hunched, eyes red, breathing like someone trying to hold on to a life slipping through their fingers. And me, I stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one as the world outside moved forward without asking if I was ready. I felt a question rising inside me, a question I had avoided for far too long. Do I stay, or do I finally walk away? Staying felt safe, predictable, familiar, like an old pair of shoes that don't fit anymore, but you keep wearing because they once did. Leaving felt terrifying, a cliff edge, a leap into a life I didn't recognize, a future built without the man I once believed would carry me into old age. He whispered behind me, "Just tell me what you need." I closed my eyes, placed a hand on my chest, felt my heartbeat, slow, steady, alive. And the answer came as soft as a prayer and as strong as a promise. I need to find myself again. He stood up, walked toward me, not fast, not desperate, but with the quiet steps of a man who knew he had no right to tell me not to go. "Does that mean," he started, voice trembling like he already knew the ending, "you're leaving?" I turned to him, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with a softness I didn't know I still had. "It means," I said, "that I'm choosing me. For the first time in decades, I am choosing me." His face crumpled, but I didn't move toward him. I didn't comfort him. I didn't apologize for the pain that his own choices had created. Because something inside me had shifted, something I couldn't undo. I walked to the bedroom and pulled out a small suitcase, not because I was running toward a new life, but because I was finally walking out of the wreckage of the old one. I packed slowly, thoughtfully, not with anger, but with clarity. Clothes that felt like me, photos that reminded me of my strength, books I had meant to read, pieces of a woman rediscovering her own worth. And as I zipped the suitcase shut, I whispered to myself, not for him, not for the past, but for the future waiting on the other side of the door, this time, I'm not leaving to escape. I'm leaving to grow. I left the house just as the moon was rising, a thin silver curve in the sky, glowing like a promise I had forgotten I was allowed to make. I didn't look back at the doorway, or the porch, or the man standing in the shadows behind me. Not because I was angry, but because some chapters are meant to close gently without the drama of slammed doors. My suitcase felt light in my hand, lighter than it had any right to feel, considering everything inside it, pieces of a life, fragments of a dream, and the beginning of someone new. When I reached the end of the driveway, I stopped, not to doubt myself, not to hesitate, but to breathe. A long, deep breath that tasted like freedom. I didn't know what waited for me. A small apartment, a quiet life, even more loneliness? Maybe, but there was something else too. Possibility. And at 60 years old, possibility is a kind of miracle. I took my first step forward, and it felt like stepping into my own skin again. Not the younger version of me, not the broken version of me, but the woman who had survived heartbreak, silence, betrayal, and still found a way to keep her heart soft. In the weeks that followed, I learned how to live alone, how to make coffee for one, how to sleep in a bed without reaching for someone who wasn't reaching back. But I also learned other things, how to laugh at my own jokes again, how to call friends I hadn't spoken to in years, how to sit on a park bench and feel the sun warm my knees without wishing to be anywhere else. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in small, surprising ways, like the day I looked in the mirror and didn't search for flaws, or the night I slept without dreaming of what I'd lost. And then, one morning, while watering the little plant I bought for my new living room, I whispered something I never thought I'd hear myself say. "I'm proud of you." Proud of the girl I used to be who hoped too hard. Proud of the woman I became after life bent her but didn't break her. Proud of the courage it took to walk out that door and choose herself. And you know what? I'm still healing, still learning, still growing. But for the first time in my life, I'm doing it as someone who finally believes she deserves peace. So if you're listening to me right now, wherever you are, whatever heartbreak you're carrying, hear me when I say this. You are never too old or too broken or too tired to start again. I was 60 when I learned that truth, and trust me, it set me free.